So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint these really simple watercolor flowers. Then after that, I'll show you how to arrange them into a sort of top-down blooming bouquet like this. As usual, I'll list the brushes I'm using here in the description below. And to start, I'm going to paint the flowers first. Now, if you want, you can follow along with me with these sketches and the color palette, and you can download those in the description. I've just set them all to multiply, and then I'll make sure I'm painting on a blank layer down here. And I'll start with this flower first. So to grab that color, I'll just do a long press on the color palette. For the brush, I'll use the smooth dry round. And this flower has a little bit of a trick, but first I'm just going to fill out the silhouette, basically in one stroke. After that, I want to create a sort of fade effect that'll give me more contrast down here. So to do that, I'll grab the freehand selection tool and just select this area. I think I'll feather it around 25%, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just brighten that area and then desaturate it a little bit. Then after that, I can continue with the same brush in the same color and fill out these sort of front petals, also in one stroke as well. And then to finish this flower, I'll add the stamens, and those are going to be on a separate layer, and I'll do a long press to grab this yellow color. I'll use the same brush, just at a smaller size, and I'll just fill those in. And the reason I did it on another layer is because I can't really follow the edge of the petal exactly, so I'll just erase it back, just to make it match. And when you do this, it doesn't have to be perfect, because if you end up erasing too far, I think it has a nice effect. And now that this flower is finished, I'll merge all the layers for it together onto one. I'll make a new layer, and I'll move on to the next flower. And for this one, I'm going to continue with the smooth dry round. And this time, I'm going to do each petal kind of as one separate stroke. So I'll just start from the center with a very light pressure. Then I'll press harder, do my best to get this shape, and then go back to the center. And I'll just repeat this for each petal. And often when you use this brush, it's going to create little errors like this, but I think it has a nice look, so I'll leave them as they are. Now, once you've got all the petals made, I recommend kind of blending the center. So I'm going to switch to the water blender, and I'll just use this to soften the inside. After that, I can do the stamen details, so I'll just grab that color. And I'm going to do it on the same layer because I don't need to edit it, but I'm going to change my brush to the Shoto brush. And I'll first do kind of like a ring of dashes, and then just some dots in the middle. And it's optional, but you can sort of enhance the kind of wet on wet watercolor look by blending some of these details. So if you want to do that, just use the fluffy water blender, a medium size, and then very, very lightly, just sort of dust it on some of these details. Next, I'll move on and make a new layer, and I'll quickly paint flower number 3. This one is really simple. It's basically the same as the flower we just painted, except I did all the petals in one stroke. And this one turned out okay, but I think the colors are too consistent, so it's optional, but I want to show you how to kind of rough them up a bit. So to do that, I'll grab the freehand selection tool. I'll just make a random selection like this. Then I'll circle back. I'll feather it out about 10%. Then I'll just darken it and saturate it. After that, I can switch to a water blender and just kind of mix up the colors a little bit. Once again, this is really optional. I'm just doing it to make it more interesting. Next, I'll move on and make a new layer, and I'll finish the last flower, which is just this little blue one. And finally, once the flowers are all finished, I'm going to start working on the arrangement. So each of these flowers is on its own layer by itself, so I'm just going to move them around with the arrow tool until it looks nice. After that, I'm going to go through and use the warp tool on each one to sort of adjust them so they fit together a little bit better. And there we go. I think this arrangement looks pretty good. There is a little bit of a transparency issue with this blue flower, but it's really easy to fix. So the way I recommend doing it is just making a duplicate of the transparent flower, selecting the original one. Then you can raise the brightness all the way to max. And it basically just makes kind of a white version of the flower just below the colored one. And if I make a few copies of it, you can see it slowly makes the transparency disappear. I think 3 copies is enough. And then I'll just merge them all together onto one layer. And also, for this flower in particular, I like that it's above the purple one, but I want it to go below the pink one. So to get that effect, I'm just going to go in there with the eraser and just erase this part where it gets occluded. And with the flowers finished and everything layered nicely, I recommend merging them all together onto one layer, and then we can move on and work on the other details. So for those, I'll turn off the flowers just temporarily, then I'll turn on the kind of Sprigs sketch here, and I'll just go through and fill these out. Once again, I'm going to make sure these are all on kind of separate layers, and most of these are stroke based. So for example, with the tiny leaves, I'm just using a very light pressure, then pressing harder in the middle, and then sort of tapering it off. And there we go, these look really good. Now once these sprigs are finished, we can sort of finish our arrangement. So I'll turn the flowers back on, and as you can see, there's kind of a transparency issue going on. Now just like with the blue flower, the transparency with these ones is also showing the stuff below it, and we can remove the transparency using the same method. So to do that, I'll just duplicate the flowers, select the original one, raise the brightness to max, and then I'll just create copies of it, copies of the white version, until the sprigs below it are being hidden. There we go. I think in this case, 4 is enough, so I'll merge them together. And lastly here, all we have to do to finish up this bouquet is to just go through with the arrow tool and sort of move the sprigs into position. Now, 3 sprigs might not be enough, so it's totally fine if you want to duplicate some of them or warp them, just to make it have more variety. And just like that, this bouquet is finished. As you probably noticed, this video is somewhat similar to last week's tutorial. The main difference here is I wanted to show you how to paint bouquets like this from above. I think these are a little bit more flexible for floral projects because they don't really have a top or a bottom. As usual, if you think I've earned it, please give this video a like. And here are 2 more watercolor tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.